Sarah Chen Williams stood in front of her bedroom mirror, deliberately choosing a simple navy blazer and black slacks instead of her usual designer suits. Today was different from her normal workdays as CEO of Pacific Sky Airlines. No meetings in the executive boardroom, no press conferences, and definitely no power lunches. Instead, she was going undercover. At 42 years old, Sarah had built Pacific Sky Airlines from a small regional carrier into one of the country's fastest-growing airlines. But success hadn't changed her belief in staying connected to what happened on the ground, or rather, in the air. Every few months, she would book an economy ticket under her married name, dress down, and observe how her airline really operated. The terminal buzzed with early morning energy as Sarah woke through with her simple carry-on bag. She smiled, watching families hug goodbye, business travelers hurry past with their coffee cups, and her ground staff efficiently managing the check-in counters. A young agent named Tommy was especially cheerful, greeting each passenger with genuine warmth. Sarah made a mental note to mention him in her next staff recognition meeting. Flight 2857 to San Francisco is now boarding at Gate C12. The announcement echoed through the terminal. Sarah joined the line, purposely waiting in Zone 4, even though she could walk onto any flight whenever she wanted. She watched as the gate agents processed passengers, noting their efficiency and politeness. A mother struggling with two small children and several bags stood in front of her. Sarah noticed how the woman kept apologizing to everyone around her as her toddler started crying. Without drawing attention to herself, Sarah stepped forward. "Here, let me help you with that bag," she said quietly, lifting the heavy carry-on. The mother's relief was immediate. "Oh, thank you so much. I don't usually travel alone with them, but their grandmother is sick, and we need to get to San Francisco right away." Sarah helped the family all the way to their seats, ensuring they were settled before making her way to her own seat in 23C. This location gave her a perfect view of the mid-cabin service area and how the flight attendants interacted with passengers. As she sat down, Sarah pulled out her phone and opened a notes app. She had already observed several things worth mentioning in the next customer service review: the efficient boarding process, Tommy's excellent customer service, and the need for maybe implementing a new policy to assist parents traveling alone with multiple children. The flight attendants began their pre-flight routine. Sarah watched them carefully, noting their professionalism. Maria Gonzalez, a senior flight attendant she recognized from company events but who wouldn't know her, demonstrated the safety features with precise movements. Another flight attendant, whose name tag read James Peterson, moved through the cabin checking seatbelts. Sarah noticed something interesting about Peterson. His interactions seemed to vary depending on the passenger. With some, he was cheerful and chatty, while with others, particularly passengers of color, his demeanor became noticeably cooler. He barely made eye contact with an elderly Asian man who asked about storing his cane. Taking out her notebook, Sarah began writing. Need to review customer service training. Possible unconscious bias issues observed. Consider implementing new diversity awareness programs. The plane took off smoothly, and soon they were cruising at 35,000 feet. Sarah continued her quiet observation, occasionally making notes about various aspects of the flight experience. The seat comfort could use improvement, and the reading light above seat 24D was flickering, small details that affected the overall customer experience. As the seatbelt sign turned off, Sarah watched the flight attendants prepare for beverage service. Peterson's behavior continued to show subtle but noticeable differences in how he treated different passengers. It wasn't anything obvious enough to draw complaints, but to Sarah's experienced eye, it was clear there were issues that needed addressing. She hadn't expected to uncover potential discrimination during this flight. Usually, her undercover trips revealed things like maintenance needs or surface efficiency issues. But this was exactly why she believed in personally checking on her airline's operations. Some problems couldn't be spotted from the comfort of a corporate office. Sarah pulled out her laptop, planning to document more of her observations while waiting for the beverage service to reach her row. Little did she know that the next few minutes would turn this routine observation flight into something much more significant. The beverage cart slowly made its way down the aisle of the Pacific Sky Airlines flight. James Peterson moved with practiced efficiency, but Sarah noticed how his smile would fade each time he served certain passengers. A young Muslim woman in a hijab received her ginger ale without any eye contact. An elderly black couple's request for extra ice was met with a barely hidden eye roll. A college student sitting across from Sarah had been recording funny videos for her social media during the flight. Now, her phone casually turned toward Peterson, capturing his changing behavior. Sarah wasn't the only one noticing the problem. Would anyone like coffee or tea? Peterson's voice was warm and friendly as he served the businessman in 23A, a middle-aged white man in an expensive suit. They chatted briefly about the weather in San Francisco. Then Peterson turned to Sarah. His face instantly hardened, and his tone became clipped. "Beverage." "Coffee, please," Sarah said politely. "With cream if possible." Peterson grabbed a cup without responding. He didn't place a napkin on her tray table like he had done for other passengers. The college student across the aisle was still recording, her eyes wide at the obvious difference in treatment. "Excuse me," the elderly black man from the couple Peterson had served earlier spoke up. "I couldn't help but notice you're treating this lady differently from other passengers. Is there a problem?" Peterson's face flushed red. "I'm providing standard service to everyone, sir. Please mind your own business." Maria Gonzalez, the senior flight attendant, heard the exchange from the back galley and started making her way forward. She had been watching Peterson's behavior with growing concern throughout the flight. "I've been flying for 40 years, young man," the elderly gentleman continued. "I know what standard service looks like, and this isn't it." Other passengers began to pay attention. The businessman in 23A looked uncomfortable, glancing between Peterson and Sarah. The mother Sarah had helped her in boarding watched from a few rows ahead, holding her sleeping toddler. "Sir, I assure you," Peterson started, but Maria cut him off. "James, I'll take over this section," she said firmly. "Please help Jennifer in the back galley." Peterson's jaw clenched, but he knew he couldn't argue with a senior flight attendant in front of passengers. As he turned to leave, his elbow accidentally bumped Sarah's tray table, causing her empty cup to rattle. "I have everything on video," the college student announced quietly to Sarah. "The way he's been treating people of color during the whole service. If you want to file a complaint, I'll send it to you." Sarah smiled gratefully at the young woman. "Thank you, that's very thoughtful of you." Maria returned with fresh coffee and extra napkins. "I'm so sorry about my colleague's behavior. This isn't what Pacific Sky Airlines stands for." "It's okay," Sarah assured her. "These things happen, but they shouldn't. And they definitely shouldn't be ignored." The elderly couple nodded in agreement. The gentleman's wife leaned forward. "You're handling this with such grace, dear. If it were me, I'd be asking to speak to the airline's management." Sarah held back a smile at the irony of that statement. Sometimes the best way to handle discrimination is to document it properly and ensure it's addressed through the right channels. The rest of the beverage service continued under Maria's supervision. Peterson stayed in the back galley, his face dark with anger when passengers walked past him to use the restroom. Several people stopped by Sarah's seat to offer support or share their own observations of Peterson's behavior. The college student, whose name was Jasmine, showed Sarah some of the clips she had recorded. "Look here," she pointed out. "You can clearly see how his whole demeanor changes depending on who he's serving. It's subtle, but when you put all these clips together..." Sarah nodded, making more notes on her laptop. This flight was revealing issues that went beyond one flight attendant's behavior. There were clearly gaps in their training program that needed to be addressed, and soon. Little did Peterson know that his next interaction with Sarah would change not just his day, but the entire course of his career at Pacific Sky Airlines. The tension in the cabin grew heavier as the flight continued. Peterson had returned from the back galley, his face set in a tight mask of barely controlled anger. Maria kept watching him closely while attending to other passengers' needs. The college student, Jasmine, still had her phone ready to record any further incidents. Sarah was typing on her laptop, documenting everything she had observed. As CEO, she had already started forming plans for improving their training programs. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as she wrote about the need for better screening during hiring and regular evaluations of staff behavior. "More coffee?" Peterson's voice suddenly came from beside her, making her look up. He had approached silently with a fresh coffee pot, and something about his expression made several nearby passengers tense up. "No, thank you," Sarah replied calmly. "I haven't finished my first cup yet." Peterson's lip curled slightly. Company policy requires us to offer additional beverages during long flights. I'm just following protocol. His voice was loud enough for others to hear how he emphasized company policy, as if daring anyone to challenge him. Then yes, just half a cup please, Sarah said, moving her laptop slightly to the side to make space. She noticed Jasmine's phone was recording again. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Peterson lifted the coffee pot and began pouring, but his hand wasn't steady. The hot liquid splashed over the rim of the cup, missing it almost entirely. Coffee streamed across Sarah's tray table, running directly onto her laptop's keyboard and her black slacks. The hot liquid soaked through her clothes immediately. Several passengers gasped. Sarah jumped up instinctively, bumping her knees against the tray table and causing even more coffee to spill. "Oh my goodness," the elderly woman behind Sarah exclaimed. That coffee was steaming hot. Instead of apologizing or helping, Peterson took a step back. A small, satisfied smirk appeared on his face for just a second before he caught himself. "You should have been more careful," he said loudly. "I'll get some napkins from the back." He turned and walked away without offering any immediate help. The businessman in 23 quickly handed Sarah his unused napkins. "That was completely deliberate," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. I saw his hand shake on purpose. Jasmine had captured everything on her phone. "I got it all," she confirmed, her voice shaking with anger. The way he poured it, his smirk afterward, everything. Maria rushed over with a stack of napkins and a bag of ice. "Oh my God, are you burned? Let me help you clean this up." "I'm so sorry, this is completely unacceptable." Sarah's laptop was still dripping coffee, but thankfully it had automatically shut down when the liquid hit it. She was more concerned about the other passengers' reactions. The mother she had helped earlier was covering her children's eyes, not wanting them to see such ugly behavior. The elderly couple behind her were voicing their outrage loudly. "This is assault," the elderly gentleman declared. "Plain and simple." He deliberately poured hot coffee on her. "We should all file witness statements," another passenger added. "This kind of behavior can't be allowed on any airline." Maria was nearly in tears as she helped Sarah clean up. "Please, let me call the purser. This needs to be reported immediately. James has been acting completely unprofessionally, but this crosses every line." Sarah nodded, keeping her composure even as her clothes continued dripping coffee. "Yes, I think it's time to speak with the purser." Her voice was steady, but those close enough could see the determination in her eyes. The plane's purser was already making his way down the aisle, having been alerted by another flight attendant who witnessed the incident. As he got closer, his eyes widened in recognition. He had seen Sarah Chen Williams at dozens of corporate meetings. The blood drained from his face as he realized exactly who Peterson had just assaulted with hot coffee. The next few minutes would change everything. The purser, Michael Roberts, rushed forward through the cabin, his face growing paler with each step. In his 15 years with Pacific Sky Airlines, he had never faced a situation quite like this one. The CEO of the company was standing in economy class, coffee dripping from her clothes, while passengers all around were recording the incident on their phones. "Miss Chenwill," he started to say, but Sarah subtly shook her head, cutting him off. She didn't want her identity revealed just yet. "Sir," she said formally, as if she didn't know him, "I'd like to file a formal complaint about one of your flight attendants. As you can see, I've had hot coffee poured on me deliberately." Michael quickly understood her approach. "Of course, ma'am. Please come with me to the front galley where we can discuss this privately. Maria, please find a blanket and our emergency clothing kit for the passenger." As Sarah stood up, several passengers spoke at once. "We all saw what happened. I have it on video. That man should be fired. We'll be witnesses for you." The elderly gentleman who had spoken up earlier raised his hand. "Young lady, I'm a retired judge. What that flight attendant did was assault. Don't let them downplay this incident." Sarah thanked everyone graciously. As she walked toward the front of the plane, passengers reached out to pat her arm supportively or offer their business cards as potential witnesses. The mother she had helped during boarding stopped her briefly. "You helped me when I was struggling," she said softly. "Let us help you now. What he did was wrong." In the front galley, Maria arrived with a blanket and the emergency kit, which contained basic clothing items for passengers who experienced spills or other accidents. Michael closed the curtain to give them privacy. Miss Chen Williams, he whispered urgently, I am so deeply sorry about this incident. I had no idea you were on board today. If I had known. Sarah held up her hand. Michael, that's exactly why I travel this way. I need to see how our airline really operates when people don't know who I am. She accepted the clean shirt from the emergency kit and the blanket from Maria. Maria's eyes went wide as she realized who Sarah was. Oh my God, she whispered. You're? Yes, I am, Sarah said kindly. But right now, I'm just a passenger who has been mistreated by one of your colleagues. And based on what I've observed, this isn't an isolated incident. Michael nodded grimly. I've had concerns about Peterson's behavior before, but it's been difficult to prove any pattern of discrimination. He's always careful to have excuses ready. Not today, Sarah said, pulling out her phone. The young woman in 23D, Jasmine, has been recording his behavior throughout the flight. And now we have dozens of witnesses to a clear act of aggression. Just then, they heard raised voices from the mid-cabin. Peterson was arguing with another flight attendant who had tried to take over his duties. I don't need to be replaced. His voice carried clearly through the cabin. I'm doing my job exactly as I was trained. Sarah's expression hardened. No, he certainly wasn't trained to discriminate against passengers or assault them with hot coffee. Michael, please relieve him of duties immediately. Maria, could you help me change into the clean shirt? As Maria helped Sarah in the tiny bathroom, Michael went to deal with Peterson. The other passengers were still buzzing with conversation. Sarah emerged from the bathroom wearing the clean emergency shirt, her stained clothes carefully packed in a plastic bag. The flight was now at its cruising altitude, but the atmosphere in the cabin remained tense. Passengers watched closely as Michael approached Peterson, who was still arguing with another flight attendant near the back galley. James, Michael said firmly, I need you to come to the front of the aircraft immediately. Why? Because some passenger couldn't hold her coffee steady? Peterson's voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. Several passengers shook their heads in disbelief at his attitude. Michael's voice became stern. That's enough, James. Front galley now. As they walked forward, Jasmine held up her phone, still recording. The elderly judge behind Sarah's seat leaned forward to speak to her. Young lady, my daughter is a reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle. Would you like me to call her about this incident? Sarah smiled politely. Thank you, sir. I think this story will reach the media soon enough. When they reached the front galley, Sarah was standing there with Maria and another flight attendant. Peterson's face showed annoyance at first, then confusion as he noticed how the other crew members were acting around her. James Peterson, Michael said formally, I'd like to introduce you to Sarah Chen Williams. Peterson's expression didn't change at first. Okay, and who is? Suddenly, his face went completely white as recognition hit him. His eyes darted to the company ID badge Michael was now holding out, showing Sarah's photo and title, CEO, Pacific Sky Airlines. No, Peterson whispered, all his previous arrogance disappearing instantly. No. Yes, Sarah said calmly. I'm the owner and CEO of this airline. I regularly fly economy class to observe our service quality. Today has been educational. Peterson's legs seemed to give out. Sarah asked Michael to bring Peterson to the first-class galley for a private conversation. The front section was nearly empty, giving them space to talk without an audience. Peterson followed slowly, looking like a man walking to his execution rather than a discussion with his CEO. Sit down, James, Sarah said, pointing to one of the jump seats. She took the one opposite him, while Michael stood guard at the curtain to ensure their privacy. Peterson's hands were shaking. Miss Chen Williams, please let me explain. No, Sarah interrupted firmly. First, you're going to listen. She pulled out her tablet and opened her notes. Since boarding, I've observed you make 17 different discriminatory interactions with passengers of color. Would you like me to list them? Peterson's face flushed red. I treat The plane landed at San Francisco International Airport 20 minutes ahead of schedule. As passengers began gathering their belongings, Sarah noticed several news vans already waiting near the terminal. Word had spread fast, and the story had captured national attention. Michael made an announcement over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that all passengers who witnessed today's incidents please remain seated. Representatives from our Human Resources Department would like to collect your statements. We apologize for any delay this may cause. Sarah watched as Jasmine helped the elderly couple forward their video evidence to the airline's secure server. The young college student had become something of a hero among the passengers, her quick thinking having captured crucial evidence of Peterson's behavior. Ms. Chen Williams, the retired judge called from his seat. I've drafted a witness statement for you. 30 years on the bench taught me exactly what details matter in discrimination cases. Sarah thanked him warmly, then turned to address all the passengers. I want to thank everyone who spoke up today. It's easy to stay quiet when we witness discrimination. It's harder, but more important, to stand against it. The mother with 2 children approached Sarah. What's going to happen to him? She asked quietly, nodding toward Peterson, who sat slumped in the jump seat. He's chosen to take responsibility and learn from this, Sarah explained. Sometimes the hardest lessons create the most meaningful change. As the passengers deplaned, they passed a group of airline executives who had rushed to the gate. Sarah recognized her VP of Human Resources, Communications Director, and Chief Operating Officer among them. Their faces showed a mix of concern and determination. The media is requesting statements, the Communications Director said urgently. How do you want to handle this? Sarah straightened her borrowed emergency shirt. Honestly and directly. Discrimination happened on our airline today. Instead of hiding from that fact, we're going to use this moment to create real change. She turned to her HR team. I want a complete overhaul of our training programs. Not just surface-level diversity training, but deep, meaningful education about unconscious bias and its impact. And I want regular undercover assessments of our service quality, focusing on equal treatment of all passengers. The COO nodded, taking notes. What about Peterson? He's accepted a 6-month suspension and intensive training program, Sarah explained. If he completes it successfully, he'll help implement our new training initiatives. His experience can teach others. Just then, Maria approached with tears in her eyes. Ms. Chen Williams, the crew, we want you to know how sorry we are. We should have noticed and stopped his behavior sooner. Sarah put a gentle hand on Maria's shoulder. This is everyone's learning opportunity. We all need to be more aware, more willing to speak up, more committed to treating every person with equal respect. The HR team began collecting statements from passengers while the communications team prepared for a press conference. Sarah noticed Peterson talking quietly with a counselor the airline had brought in to help him process the day's events. Jasmine stopped by one last time before leaving. My video has over 1 million views already, she said. But what's really amazing are the comments. People are sharing their own stories of discrimination during flights. This is starting conversations everywhere. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Change often starts with one incident that opens everyone's eyes. The hard part is turning that moment into lasting transformation. As the last passengers left the plane, Sarah gathered her leadership team. I want proposals on my desk by tomorrow morning. New training programs, assessment protocols, reporting systems for discriminatory behavior. This isn't just about fixing one problem on one flight. This is about setting a new standard for our entire industry. Looking around at her team's determined faces, Sarah knew this incident would indeed change more than just one flight attendant's career. It would reshape how Pacific Sky Airlines approached equality and respect at every level. The story wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. 3 months after the coffee incident, Sarah stood in front of a packed auditorium at Pacific Sky Airlines Training Center. The room was filled with flight attendants, pilots, ground crew, and corporate staff, all gathered for the launch of Project Perspective, the airline's new comprehensive training program. Real change doesn't happen overnight, Sarah began, looking across the eager faces. It happens through continuous effort, honest conversations, and a willingness to learn from our mistakes. In the front row sat many familiar faces from that memorable flight. Maria had been promoted to head of in-flight service training. The elderly judge and his wife served on the airline's new passenger advisory board. Jasmine, whose videos had sparked nationwide discussions, now worked part-time as the airline's social media consultant while finishing college. And there, sitting quietly in the middle of the room, was James Peterson, His 6 months of training had transformed him in surprising ways. The angry, defensive man from that flight was gone, replaced by someone who had faced his biases and chosen to change. "I'd like to invite James to share his story," Sarah announced. A murmur went through the crowd as Peterson walked to the podium. Some knew him personally, others had only heard about the incident, but everyone fell silent as he began to speak. 3 months ago, I was the subject of viral videos showing me discriminating against passengers," he said, his voice steady but humble. "I didn't think of myself as racist. I didn't want to believe I was treating people differently. But the evidence was clear, and my actions were inexcusable." He paused, taking a deep breath. "Instead of firing me, Pacific Sky Airlines offered me a chance to learn and grow. Through intensive training and countless conversations with people I had hurt, I began to understand my unconscious biases. Today, I'm here to help others recognize and overcome their own." Sarah watched proudly as Peterson shared specific examples from his learning journey. He talked about meeting with diverse passenger groups, studying the history of discrimination in transportation, and learning to recognize his own biased thoughts before they became actions. The changes at Pacific Sky Airlines had gone far beyond one person's transformation. Every employee now went through enhanced diversity training. Regular undercover assessments, similar to Sarah's original flight, helped maintain high standards of equal treatment. The airline had created a simple system for passengers to report any concerns about discriminatory behavior. These changes had caught the industry's attention. Other airlines were now copying Pacific Sky's training programs. The story had evolved from a viral video of discrimination into a case study of positive corporate change. After the presentation, Sarah met with her leadership team. The latest customer satisfaction scores showed significant improvements, especially from minority passengers. Employee morale had increased, and job applications had soared as people sought to work for an airline known for its inclusive culture. Ms. Chen Williams. Peterson approached her after the meeting. "I never properly thanked you for that day. Most CEOs would have just fired me to protect the company's image." Sarah smiled. "Firing you would have been easier, but it wouldn't have created real change. Your story helps others understand that growth is possible if we're willing to face uncomfortable truths about ourselves." Just then, Sarah's phone buzzed with a news alert. A major business magazine had named Pacific Sky Airlines as Most Improved Company Culture of the Year. The article praised their transparent handling of the coffee incident and the positive changes that followed. Project Perspective isn't just about preventing discrimination, Sarah told her team. It's about building a culture where everyone feels valued, respected, and heard. We're not perfect yet, but we're moving in the right direction. As she looked around at her diverse team, Maria discussing training plans with Peterson, Jasmine showing their improved social media metrics, the elderly judge offering legal perspectives on their policies. Sarah knew that sometimes the worst moments could lead to the best changes. The coffee incident had been a dark day for Pacific Sky Airlines, but it had sparked a transformation that would benefit passengers and employees for years to come. Sometimes, Sarah reflected, the most important changes start with one difficult moment at 35,000 feet.